Every place has a story. Layers of human and non-human activity change our landscape over thousands of years. As landscape architects, we are charged with uncovering hidden parts of the city, recovering lost stories in order to design a future that weaves together the lessons of the past, the people of the present, and the hope that in the future, through design, we can reveal the voices of communities rather than erasing them. Over the past few months, we have set out to uncover some of these stories. Touring the 5 boroughs of New York City, we spoke with professionals, researched historical maps, and uncovered the way these narratives have altered the New York City landscape. We started in Van Cortlandt Park, where plans to daylight Tibbetts Brook are being proposed. This tidal stream has been buried for over 300 years. We spoke with John Butler, Director of Programs and Stewardship at the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, to learn about the changing watercourse and restoration efforts along its ancestral path.
The stream starts in Yonkers, and you have a lot of sinuosity, as you would in a natural stream setting. And the stream actually originally flowed right past here, south through what is now the Kingsbridge neighborhood, and then also the Marble Hill neighborhood too, and opened up into the Spuyten Creek, which is now part of kind of dredged out and has become the Harlem River and the Harlem River Canal.
The unique geology of this area made it an attractive site to the communities that settled there.
The bedrock there is actually Inwood marble, whereas most of the bedrock around here is Fordham gneiss, and so it's actually super eroded and flat and open, and the soils are really healthy, and so you end up having this flat open area that would be great for farming. You had this stream which was tidal all the way up, so you had oysters, which is a year-long food source.
By the 1700s, the Van Cortlandt family modified the course of the brook, digging out a lake and installing a dam that powered a grist mill. This was the start of a series of alterations, which have lasted to this day. Visiting Van Cortlandt, you can still see where the creek was diverted directly into a CSO sewer pipe, 1.5 miles from its original terminus.
It's a really interesting location. There's a lot of issues that happen when you have a pond that's been dammed up for 300 plus years, so we're kind of dealing with a lot of that now in terms of management and maintenance. And the idea is really just to create a healthy forest and watershed that surrounds Tibbetts Brook, because the brook right now has a watershed of about 3,000 acres, and almost half of that is Van Cortlandt Park. So what we can do is a good amount here to improve the water quality of the brook.
Every Wednesday and Friday, the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance hosts volunteer days, where community members and organizations plant trees and remove invasive vines. Much of the new plant material for the site is supplied by the Greenbelt Native Plant Center. Run by New York City Parks, the Greenbelt Native Plant Center preserves diversity by collecting wild seeds from across New York and New Jersey. Ed Toth is the director of the Greenbelt Native Plant Center, the municipal nursery of New York City's Department of Parks and Recreation. Ed speaks about the importance of preserving biodiversity in city ecologies.
I mean, that's what got this place started. Is we needed plants, and where were we going to get them from? And the only group that was around doing it were 2 people, who were in a facility a couple miles from here doing it on a very small scale. Not only learn the species, but learn to recognize when you're in a given habitat and see in a heightened way what plants are there and how they're associated, which ones are associated with each other, and what are the conditions that are prevailing where you're seeing this species, so that you bring that sensitivity to your design. Knowing the species and a little bit about its more horticultural properties is only, in my view, the beginning of the knowledge that you need to bring to ecological design anyway.
Since the early 1980s, the Greenbelt Native Plant Center has provided native plants and seeds from local plant populations in support of the restoration and management of the city's most valuable natural areas. Our next stop was Newtown Creek, an industrial and highly polluted tributary that flows from the East River into the border of Brooklyn and Queens. We met Nathan Kessinger at a large granite boulder, a glacial erratic that was pushed and deposited by the Laurentide ice sheet during the last ice age 17,000 years ago. It marks the beginning of the concealed Newtown Creek Nature Walk.
So we're standing today in front of the entrance to the Newtown Creek Nature Walk, which is sort of an unexpected space that is situated on the waterfront of the Newtown Creek. And it's really one of the only places where you can get out to the water itself. There's very few places along the creek's entire length where you can go into the water or even get close to the water as a member of the public. So the Greenpoint wastewater treatment plant underwent a huge renovation more than a decade ago. And the community was very much against that project happening. The community has been living here with this wastewater treatment plant for decades and decades. It causes a lot of stench in the neighborhood. It's caused a lot of discomfort for the homes that are just less than a block away from this wastewater treatment plant. So when the city wanted to expand on it, the community fought against it, but ultimately was able to not stop the project but gain some concessions.
One of these concessions was a nature walk, which brought us to the creek's edge.
We're standing, as you can see, in this very industrial area. You've got a scrapyard, which the park highlights. The park is asking you to look at this scrapyard, and yet we're in what he calls a nature walk. Right. These are some of the first hints of nature here. This is this giant stone staircase that he built that invites you to go into the water. And when I first came to this park, when it first opened back in 2007, 2008, I saw this staircase and I was like, this is a terrible idea. What are you thinking? Why would you build this staircase? People are going to think they should jump in the Newtown Creek, which is terribly polluted. It's one of the most polluted bodies of water in the United States, besides the oil spill and all the centuries of industry that have dumped into the water. It's polluted with raw sewage. Billions of gallons of raw sewage are pumped into the creek every year. So yeah, I came to the park and I was like, what are you thinking? You're telling people to get in the water. But the more I thought about it, the more I was my thinking kind of reversed, and I was like, actually I think this is one of the greatest parks in New York City exactly because of that. He's saying you should expect that you should be able to get in the water. You should expect that the waterway is going to be clean enough that you can walk right into it and go for a swim. It once was, and it could be in the future at some point.
The Newtown Creek Nature Walk was funded by an initiative that pays reparations to the neighborhood of Greenpoint after an oil spill and a century of toxic industry. This fund has also financed other environmentally sound projects in the surrounding neighborhood, one of which is a recently overhauled Greenpoint Library. On a sunny spring day, we toured the Greenpoint Library and Education Center with Nick Shannon, senior designer at Scape.
This library, the funding came partly from the Greenpoint Environmental Fund, which came after a state settlement with the ExxonMobil oil spill in Newtown Creek, which was one of the largest inland oil spills in U.S. history. And so there's been a long history of sort of environmental degradation in the Greenpoint neighborhood, and this is sort of one of the ways to try to rectify some of that. And the community really responded to sort of creating this sort of institution of education and also sort of stewardship. So that's how the Brooklyn Public Library branch came to make this into not only one of its, turn it into also an environmental education center. So the ground floor is really inspired by the geological formations of the history of Greenpoint. You can see the boulders here are situated in the pattern of the Laurentide ice sheet some 18,000 years ago. the ice sheet was over 2,000 feet tall and covered all of Brooklyn. And the boulders are arranged in the pattern that the ice sheet retreated. And so the plaza really references that geological history. The boulders that you see behind me and sort of like integrated in the striations of the plant beds, they not only reference the geological formations and sort of gesture of the glacial ice sheets historically, but they also, part of the concept for the landscape design was to reuse some of the more one-off pieces in the quarries. So these boulders were sourced from a quarry in upstate New York locally. And during the quarrying process, it sort of leaves a lot of smaller pieces that aren't normally used in landscape design. So we're on the second floor roof right now, which is the reading room. You can see there's a large planter and expanded bench that is meant to accommodate a flexible range of activities, more sort of like a refuge for readers to come up here, read a book. It can also accommodate about like 25 to 30 students in non-COVID times. So it's functioned sort of like an outdoor classroom. There's a big connection between like the indoor and the outdoor space. So the program from inside at their educational labs is meant to sort of spill over into this outdoor area. Right behind me is a rainwater cistern that holds about 1,500 gallons of rainwater that's captured from the third level roof. So any runoff from there is sort of flows by gravity down that pipe into the cistern, and then it's used to irrigate the plants on this level, and also there's a pump on the third floor that is used to water the plants on the beds up there. So we're on the third floor right now at the demonstration garden. You can see there's these rows of raised beds, planters, that are meant to be used, worked with the community and the library staff to plant edible food and sort of teach kids and community members about sustenance and growing their own food. On the sort of outer ring, you can see the flatter, more sedum-covered green roof, which is sort of manages some of the stormwater runoff and also provides some cooling effects for the building below. There are sort of like stripes of flowering perennials that provide some pollinator habitat and also reference sort of the history of Greenpoint and the Polish agricultural history of the neighborhood. And yeah, eventually in post-COVID, these beds are going to be, these are sort of some placeholder plants right now, but eventually they'll sort of be sort of filled with edibles that are chosen by community members.
The revamp project opened in spring 2020, right before the pandemic. It is anticipated to reopen fully to the public later this year.
I think that some of the sort of the libraries in general provide that unique and challenging opportunity of working with the renovations of existing structures, but hopefully some of the lessons learned here of that sort of like really deeply ingrained cultural and geological references and the impact that it can have on communities and sort of providing a space for people to connect and really reveal some of the histories that have been covered up over time. Hopefully that can provide a lesson for future renovations and projects.
Our landscapes are filled with countless stories, some of which we are aware, and some that remain hidden. Whose stories remain untold, and what can we uncover?